Let's come back to consider the development of Britain's nuclear deterrent itself. By 1952, we had an atomic bomb. By 1957, we had a hydrogen bomb. Now, Graham Farmelo, in his recent book, Churchill's Bomb, makes some various suggestions about the development of the weapons and why Britain wanted to push this idea forward of its own independent nuclear deterrent. Clement Attlee, the Labour Prime Minister, commissioned the programme, but Winston Churchill, coming back into power as Prime Minister in 1951, and the legacy he left through to 1955 and beyond, suggested that for Britain to be a credible force in future negotiations, then it needed to be an atomic weapon state. It did, for example, effectively guarantee it a permanent place on the UN Security Council. Now, behind us is the first operational thermonuclear weapon, a 1 megaton yellow sun free-fall nuclear bomb. And we mentioned that the Valiant was the aircraft that was used to test these weapons by dropping them. One of the longer running issues which comes out of the 1950s, 1960s and beyond is the legacy of nuclear testing. Now, the effects of radiation and the terrible consequences of using an atomic bomb were known at the time that the Hiroshima and Nagasaki targets were attacked in 1945. So we see America and Britain and France and the Soviet Union testing nuclear weapons, both atmospheric tests and underground tests, knowing that there is going to be a legacy from using those weapons. If you go back to, say, the Americans in 1953 and the Castle Bravo test that went wrong, the irradiation of the Lucky Dragon 5 fishing boat and the fatality there of one of the Japanese sailors suddenly started a level of debate in Japan about their status as a victim of nuclear weapons. Britain used Pacific Islands, but it also used the mainland of Australia through areas which are largely desert, with the promise that Britain would share some nuclear secrets with the Australians in return for the use of their territory. And there is a legacy, whether lands were cleared properly of the indigenous population, whether British members of the armed forces were deliberately exposed to radiation during that time. So we have a dark period in the decisions of a number of Western governments and the Soviet Union itself as to exactly what sort of risks they're going to expose their population and the population of others by detonating nuclear weapons. And I think this is something we might want to just pause on and think back. Although only 2 nuclear weapons have been used in anger, before the end of the 20th century, nearly 2,050 nuclear weapons had actually been detonated. And that's something I'd like you to just think about before we move on to the next stage of the course.